Okay. So an interesting halakha that's relevant specifically or especially during the winter months. From when should we be praying mincha? Now this question is really, you can split it into two. Yeah? You can split it, number one, what is the earliest time b'di'avad you can pray mincha? Which is sometimes relevant on Shabbat. What time do you guys pray on Shabbat mincha? 12:15. So you want to know exactly when the beginning of Mincha Gedolah is. That's one question. However, there's another question, which is what I want to focus on. Should we bichlal be praying Mincha Gedolah? Maybe we should specifically be praying Mincha Ketana. And I'll explain what Mincha Gedolah and Ketana mean. So the Gemara quotes a Braita. The Braita says that the time of Mincha Gedolah begins from 6.5 hours into the day. Let's assume that means half an hour after Hatzot. 6.5 hours into the day is Mincha Gedolah. Hatzot Hayom. Kamuvan, yes, midday. What is Mincha Ketana, says the Baraita? From 9.5 hours into the day. Adkan. That's all that's necessary for us to know from the Baraita. What is the difference between Mincha Gedolah and Mincha Ketana? So the Rishonim explain. Mincha Gedolah was the time that theoretically you could bring the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim. So every day there was a communal Tamid twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and a Korban Olah on behalf of the whole of Am Yisrael. That's what we say, Vaydaber Adonai Moshe Moshe. Yeah. So Olat Tamid. There was in the morning and in the afternoon. And the Korban Olat Tamid in the morning was meant to be before all the other korbanot, and the korban tamid shel ben ha'arbaim was meant to be after anyone brought a neder or a present, a nedava, right? The korban olah was meant, so all the korbanot of the day were meant to be sandwiched in between korban olat haboker, olat tamid shel boker, and olat tamid shel ben ha'arbaim. And when the Chachamim instituted, when they made the daily schedule of tefillot, they based it and they paralleled it of these korbanot. That means they said Shachrit should be paralleled to Korban Tamid Shel Shachar, Mincha Korban Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim, and the fact that every Jew could bring a Korban Nedava, so you could pray a Tfilat Nedava, you could pray a voluntary prayer, like they could bring a voluntary Korban. In other words, they assessed that the idea of Tfilot should be Bimkom Keneged Korbanot. Shachrit for Tamid Shel Shachar, Mincha Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim. Okay, so from 6.5 hours into the day, half an hour after Hatzot, you could already bring the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim. That means you could begin the process, the Shechita, which is the first part of the process of the Hakrava, of the Korban, could be done already from 6.5 hours into the day. Now there's a question if it could have been done Min HaTorah from Hatzot. Many say Min HaTorah, you could do it. What's Ben Ha'arbaim, by the way? What does the word Ben Ha'arbaim mean? What does it translate as practically, before literally? Huh?
Between the evenings.
No.
Between the evenings.
Okay, practically, before literally. Practically it means afternoon. Literally, why does it say Ben Ha'arbaim? It's a good question. Between the two, what did you say? Between the two evenings. So the Gaon Mivilna explains, Yeshne Aravim. Now, Erev, we're used to thinking is night, and that's not a mistake. Erev Vayiboker is talking about night, but Erev really comes from the Lashon Ma'arav. Nachon? Ma'arav the west. Because when the sun starts going towards the Ma'arav, Zekvar Erev Ahat. Once it's after midday, it's already going towards the west. It's closer to setting than to rising. So Zeh Erev Ahat. And then the actual Shki'ah, the actual sunset, is the second Erev, where it's actually gone into the Ma'arav, v'nitkasa me'inenu, and it's not within our eyesight. So Ben Ha'arbaim means between these two Aravim. Yafeh? So the afternoon means between Hatzot Hayom and Sheki'at HaHama. So Min HaTorah, it's almost unanimously agreed upon, they could have done the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim immediately after Hatzot, because they're Kvar Ben Ha'arbaim. So why then do you have to wait half an hour? Because they were worried. People, in those days you checked via the sun. You're going to be exact. It's exactly, so you need a significant turn, a significant tilt towards the Ma'arab for us to be sure that indeed it's Ben Ha'arbaim. Okay, that's Minha Gedolah. Mincha Ketana, 9.5 hours into the day, was the practical time that they did the Shechita on a general day. They generally made sure not to do the Shechita of the Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim, not to begin the offering process of the Ben Ha'arbaim until 9.5 hours into the day. Why? Because they wanted people to have more time to bring Korbanot Nedarim Davot. Right? Remember, all the Korbanot were meant to be sandwiched between these two Korbanot. If I bring the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim very early, Mr. Chaim Yankel is coming with his Korban. Slicha, midai mu'achar, tavo machar. Not fair. So therefore, we tried to postpone it. So from 9.5 hours into the day was the earliest time they would generally, on a regular day, begin the Shechita process, and it would take an hour till they did the Zerikat Adam. So they gave people time.
Any reason why they call it Katana and Gedolah? Is there like any...
Very simple reason.
more attribution?
From Minha Gedolah, you have more time. And from Mincha Ketana, you have less time. In other words, Mincha Gedolah, Keilu, it looks at itself from 6.5 till the end of the day. And Mincha Ketana looks at itself from 9.5 to the end of the day. So here you have more time, here you have less time. Yeah, but good question, important question. So that is the idea of Mincha Gedolah, Mincha Ketana. Now there was, let's say, one day a year where they were makdim the Mincha Gedolah, the Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim as early as possible. It was when Erev Pesach was Chal Yot be'Erev Shabbat. They needed to, there was one korban that you bring after the Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim. And that was the Korban Pesach. And everybody, all the Chaburot, everybody had to bring their own Korban Pesach. Every person had to make their own Chabura. And they would be Moneh, the Bnei HaMishpacha, on the Korban Pesach. And that all needed to be done after the Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim. So on Erev Pesach, you can imagine, there was a massive rush. So they did the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim, and then everybody would start bringing their Psachim. So then they would begin the process immediately, 6:30, 6.5 hours into the day, half an hour after midday. That's when they would begin the process. Are we clear? So I'll tell you what Mincha Gedolah means theoretically, you can bring it from them. Mincha Ketana is practically on a regular day, they can bring it from them. On fluke occurrences where they were in a rush and they had to get a lot done, i.e. Erev Pesach, especially if it was Chal Erev Shabbat, they would do it on Mincha Gedolah. Clear? Comes along the Rambam, and the Rambam says, somebody who prays from Mincha Gedolah, Yatsa. He's Yotzei, he doesn't need to pray again. He does Mincha from 6.5 hours into the day, he's okay, he doesn't need to pray again. He's fulfilled his obligation. Now we have a rule, in general, when somebody speaks like that, when a posek or Mishnah speaks like that, it's a mashma b'di'avad. If he would have asked me, I would have said, don't pray then. You already did it, you don't need to pray again. It's done. Yeah, b'di'avad. Says the Rambam, and further, the Rambam supports this with a further comment. He says, many people have a minhag to pray twice, mincha. Once mincha gdolah, and once mincha ketana. I don't know anyone who does that. But that's what he says. And some Geonim said that you should make sure that the first one should be a reshut. What does a reshut mean? And a dava. It's a voluntary gift to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like you could give a voluntary korban, I'm giving a voluntary prayer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the second one, mincha ketana, should be the chiyuv. Why, says the Rambam? Because look, the first one is not tadir. This mincha, this tamid shel ben ha'arbaim, if you would be doing the first one as the chovah, and the second one as the reshut, you can't do both as chovah. You can't do the chiyuv twice. Yeah? But so you say maybe you should do the first one as the chovah, and the second one should be the gift. Yes? Says the Rambam, no. Because the first one is more tadir. It's more tadir. Why? Sorry, Mechila. The second one is more tadir. Why? Because the second one, mincha ketana, that was the generic time for the korban to be brought. You want to do the first time? The first time was used once a year, Erev Pesach. So why would I do mincha gedolah, my chiyuv? I'll do mincha ketana, my chiyuv, because that was the daily occurrence, that my tamid shel ben ha'arbaim would be brought mincha ketana. My voluntary prayer, I can do whenever I want. I can do mincha gedolah as well, en baya. Do you understand? So the Rambam is telling you that mincha gedolah is b'di'avad, and he's telling you why. Because you are praying keneged a korban that was brought once a year, instead of praying keneged a korban that was brought kimat every day. Clear? Da'at Rambam. And he's not alone in this. The Meiri also says this. It's only b'di'avad from mincha gedolah, and there may be some other Rishonim who say that. Maran HaShulchan Aruch quotes this Rambam.
Was it a b'diavad time, or was it just practically speaking? On
It's a
those
good.
days that
You're raising the point as follows. Jordan's saying very good ta'ana. He's saying nowhere in the Torah does it say Mincha Gedolah is a worse time than Mincha Ketana. The reason why they would practically postpone the Korban until Mincha Ketana was because technically for other people to bring Korbanot. Does that make the time inherently less good, less associated with the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim? Mi amar. So I don't have to bring Korbanot Nedarim Undavot. אז אני יכול להתפלל מנחה גדולה, maybe it's even better. זריזין מקדימים למצוות. It's a very good ta'ana. כנראה, we see from the Rambam that he held that it's not about conceptually the time that you could bring the korban. You are actually praying connected the korbanot that would be brought today or were brought on a general basis in the Beit HaMikdash. But I definitely think that the people who argue with the Rambam adopt your svara. Yeah, so it's a very good ta'ana. Yeah, we clear on his ta'ana? Now, who argues with the Rambam? The Tur quotes from his father, the Rosh, and he agrees with his father, the Rosh and the Tur, Rabbeinu Asher, and his son, the Tur. They both argue with the Rambam. And they sound like it is absolutely fine, no problem whatsoever, to pray from Mincha Gedolah. Lechatachila. And I think that their reasoning is what Jordan said. Nowhere does it say that there is a problem to bring the Korban from Mincha Gedolah. It was for practical reasons. So this is just as afternoon as later on. It's a perfect time. So we have a machloket rishonim. By the way, there are some rishonim who sound like it's better to pray Mincha Gedolah because of Zrizin Maktimin HaMitzvot. And some rishonim, Rabbeinu Hananel, who sounds like you should mamash be praying after Mincha, after Plaga Mincha, as late as possible, as long as you're not getting too close to Shkia. Okay, so we have all but the main two shitot I want to focus on, not to get carried away, is Mincha Gedolah lechatachila or b'di'avad? According to the Rambam and the Meiri, b'di'avad. According to the Rosh and the Tur, it is lechatachila.
And the optimum time really is between the midpoint between Gedolah and Katana. Is that optimum point that people should really pray?
I haven't mentioned an optimum time. If you want to encompass both opinions, then you should be doing Ketana. But there's not, and based on what I've said so far, there's not necessarily unanimously agreed upon optimal time. Okay? So now, Maran HaShulchan Aruch has, what would we predict he would be posek? I don't know. He's got the Rosh on one side, the Rambam on the other side. Very often he leans a bit more towards the Rambam. Even though both the Rosh and the Rambam are two of his three kingpins, yeah? Two of the three Amudei HaOra'ah. Very often he's more noteh to the Rambam when it comes to a situation like this. On the other hand, it's a Drabanan here. And it's only lechatachila. Even the Rambam agrees b'di'avad yotzeh. So we could have thought otherwise. We could have thought he would go with the Rosh. He would be lenient. But Maran HaShulchan Aruch says, somebody who prays from Mincha Gedolah yatsa. Who's he quoting? The Rambam. He's mashma b'di'avad yotzeh from Mincha Gedolah. In other words, according to Maran HaShulchan Aruch, if you would ask the Shulchan Aruch, should I pray Mincha Gedolah? What they do every day in Rav Yosef Chai and many Batei Knesiyot in the winter, he would say no. Yeah? You did it, don't pray again. Yeah? Fine.
Why is he saying no?
Why is he saying no? Because he goes with the Rambam. And the Rambam says that because it's a davar she'eno tadir, so you can be yotzeh, but that's not when they generally bought the korban. That's the Shulchan Aruch's opinion. Rambam with a mem. Rambam, as Ashkenazim would say. Maimonides. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, not ben Nachman. Okay. I haven't mentioned the Ramban, and throughout the conversation I don't think I will, so let's, whenever I say anything that sounds like that, assume it's the Rambam with a mem. Fine. So Maran HaShulchan Aruch goes that way, and I'll tell you, there's a very interesting, fascinating debate amongst the later Sfaradi poskim. What is better? Ad kedei kach. What is better? Should I do Mincha Gedolah b'minyan or Mincha Ketana b'yachid? Let's assume you only have one minyan. You go to a town where there's one minyan. Mincha Gedolah. 1 o'clock, Mincha. There's no other minyan throughout the day. Should you do Gedolah b'minyan or Ketana b'yachid? And I tell you the truth, it's a big mahloket. Can you believe it? Ad kedei kach. Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shaul says, Minyan is not as important as the Zman of the Tefillah. He says, if lecha tahila, you have to pray Mincha Ktana, that trumps Minyan.
Yeah, this man passed, but this man.
No. He's talking about Mincha Gdola and Mincha Ktana.
It's all this man shall mincha.
Look, I tell you,
now
on the other hand, you could ask a question on Rav Ben Zion that he contradicts himself slightly. When it comes to Netzach Hama, are you allowed to pray before HaNetzach Hama? Just grammatically, there's no such word as Netzach Hama. You know that, yeah? HaNetzach Hama, but you'll excuse me saying Netzach Hama. Yeah, the He is not a He HaYidi'ah. It's not a prefix. It's part of the actual word. Sunrise. So fine, I'm going to allow myself to say Netzach Hama just for practical purposes. So if somebody wants to pray before Netzach Hama, is that okay? B'di'avad. What happens if he's traveling and it's very hard, or his work and this and that, he's going to have to rush home? Sha'at adchak. Sha'at adchak. Kedi'avad dami. Very interesting rule in the poskim. Somebody who's at a time of need, he can have the halacha lechatachila like somebody b'di'avad. So that means b'di'avad. If I came to the rabbi and said, I prayed before sunrise, do I need to pray again? What would he tell me? You shouldn't have prayed at sunrise, but you did? Don't pray again. Yeah. So now somebody comes and says, I'm in an emergency. I'm in a rush. It's difficult for me. Not impossible. Difficult for me to pray with or after sunrise. Can I pray before? The rabbi can say, 1 minute. If he came to me and said, I've already prayed, I would say, you're okay. So now somebody who's in a difficult situation, I can act with him the same as I would act with somebody who's already done something. So I can say, pray lecha tahila.
The alternative, he doesn't pray.
No. Even if the alternative is he could pray, it's difficult for him. It's hard. It means he's going to need to rush home. It means the kids are going to be rushed. It means he's going to need to, breakfast is going to be for 1 minute. It's difficult. It can be done. So the Rav will tell him, Sha'at adchak kedi'avad dami. You hear that? Says Rav Ben Zion Abba Shaul, what should I do if I have a minyan before sunrise and no minyan after sunrise? I'm free. I don't have work. I'm enough money, Baruch Hashem, Yishtabach Shemo La'ad. But everybody else in the winter is running, except for Od Yosef Chai, is doing Shachrit before sunrise. So let's assume there's only before net minyanim. Should I pray in a minyan before net, or with or after net, biyahid? Says Rav Ben Zion Abba Shaul, pray in a minyan before net. You know why? Because praying biyahid is a sha'at adchak, no? If someone's in a rush and he says to the rabbi, it's difficult for me to come to such a late minyan. Can I go to an earlier minyan? It's difficult. It's not impossible, it's difficult. What would the rabbi say? Go early. Sha'at adchak. So what? Me wanting to pray b'minyan as opposed to b'yahid is less sha'at adchak than this guy trying to eat his breakfast slowly? You hear his argument? His argument is the ideal of praying with a minyan or not praying with the minyan is the same as a sha'at adchak. So like a sha'at adchak, you tell the guy he can pray earlier. So for a minyan, you can also pray earlier. Good ta'ana. So why doesn't he apply the same thing here for mincha? Mincha, he should have said, if you have a minyan at mincha gedola, no minyan mincha ktana, sha'at adchak kedi'avad dami, and you should be praying for mincha gedola. I think that's a very strong question on his conflicting views. By the way, with regards to HaNetzach Hama, most people agree to Rav Ben Zion that you should pray b'minyan before net rather than b'yahid after net. Chacham Ovadia argues. Chacham Ovadia holds no.
I wouldn't overrule praying at net.
I don't want to get into that. He seems that it would be, but I can appreciate that as a pshara between the poskim. I think that's a good middle ground. Okay, so we're going to get. We haven't yet discussed what I think, but I've shown you that Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shaul holds it is better to pray mincha ktana b'yachid rather than mincha gdola b'tzibur. And Chacham Ovadia initially also held that, and then he was Hoser, he retracted. And I'll explain why. He retracted to what you say, which is you should do mincha ktana b'tzibur rather than mincha gdola b'yachid. There's a teshuvah of the Rif. Sorry, gedola b'tzibur rather than ktana b'yachid. Mechila. Now, you're listening, very good. So there's a teshuvah of Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi. Yeah, now the Rif, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, he lived 1,000 years ago. And his teshuvot were not around, the Bet Yosef certainly did not have his teshuvot. We have them. It's we assume that all of what is written bishmo is from him, unless there's reason to assume otherwise. That's what the poskim say. It's reliable enough that we'll assume it's him, unless we have a contradiction that can't be answered between what he writes in his main work, which is on the Shas, versus his responsa. Okay? So in the Teshuvot of the Rif, it is very clear that he held that from Mincha Gedola is Lechatachila. It sounds like he prefers Mincha Gedola over Mincha Ketana. Like the Rosh. Remember, I mentioned the Rosh versus the Rambam. Rambam says Mincha Gedola is B'di'avad, the Rosh says Lechatchila. Now we have the Rif, who the Bet Yosef did not see, who sides with the Rosh. Based on the rules of the Bet Yosef, had he seen this Rif, what would he do?
Yeah, the majority was Amudei.
He would have gone with the majority of the three Amudei HaOra'ah. The Bet Yosef makes this interesting rule that the Ramah, the Ashkenazi Pesach, is not happy about Bichlal at all. He makes a rule that the Bet Yosef wanted to make a Shulchan. He did make a Shulchan Aruch, but he planned on making a Shulchan Aruch that would be as accepted as possible. He wanted to make Torah Hat Li Yisrael. One Torah, he says it looks like 1,000 Torot. This guy does this one does that, this one does that. So he said, let me make one book that everybody will accept. How are you going to do that? Imagine if you wanted to make a book that everyone's going to accept. If you're going to say your opinion, everyone before me did that already. So he says, I'm going to take the people who are the most accepted poskim. Yeah, let's say if you'd be making a Sephardi halacha book that you wanted every English-speaking Jew to accept. So you take Chacham Ovadia, Rav Ben Zion, Rav Shaul, Mordechai Eliyahu, and Rav Mazuz, and you'd say, these four are the main ones, and these are the four people I work with. I'm not saying my own opinion. I'm quoting them. If three of them are on one side, I go with them. If two on this, yeah? You understand? That's what he did. He said the three main poskim that Klal Yisrael were Mekabel, the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam. So they're like my virtual Bet Din. They're my online Bet Din. They're not in front of him. They weren't in front of each other. Yeah. But when two of them side against the other about a topic, I go with the two. When there's one against one, beseder, I'll go with the majority of poskim, lechumra, lekula, doraita, derabanan, etc. But his default position is, let's start from these three. If I have two of the three, kol sheken, if I have three of the three, on one side, I go with them. Clear? But now we have two of the three on one side. He didn't know that we have two of the three on one side, because he didn't see the teshuvot of the Rif. We have the teshuvah of the Rif. He goes with the Rosh, and therefore there's big room to suggest that the Shulchan Aruch, had he seen the Rosh, may have retracted.
Does he do that with, for example, Tshuvat HaRosh?
Wait, hold on. Are we? Yeah.
He does have a Tshuvat HaRosh to say that that's...
He uses the Rosh's shita from Tshuvot HaRosh. Yes.
So
He's
he
even
would
got a
do
discussion what overrides what.
Yeah.
Tshuvot HaRosh or Piskei HaRosh, and the only reason why he sides with Piskei HaRosh because it was written later. Yeah? Are we clear? So there's possibility, I would say maybe even probability, that the Shulchan Aruch, had he seen the tshuva of the Rif, would have been a Hoser. That's point number one. Now there's another interesting thing that the Shalmet Tzibur quotes, a Zohar HaKadosh. I checked out the Zohar. The Zohar also seems to be very explicit that from Mincha Gdola is an absolutely lechatachila time to pray. Yeah? So the Zohar has weight in halacha. Where do we see that from? I want to introduce this to the Bet Yosef. There's a very interesting Bet Yosef where he discusses when someone has an aliyah la Torah, do they have to say it with a hazan or not? Yeah? You know, when you have an aliyah, are you meant, the Baal Koreh is reading, he's the one reading it loudly. Should you also be saying it? So many poskim, or a number of poskim, and no posik argues with them explicitly, many poskim say, if you don't say the words of the Torah after you made the bracha, that's a bracha levatala. Yeah. And the Bet Yosef goes with that. And then he quotes, however, I found in the Zohar that the Zohar sounds like you shouldn't be saying it. The Zohar says two voices at the same time. La mishtama'eh. Don't say it. Says the Bet Yosef. So the Rishonim, the earlier poskim did not see the Zohar. Had they seen the Zohar, this is what the Bet Yosef says, had they seen the Zohar, they would have retracted. they would have said the Oleh does not need to say a word. They would have put their head down for the Zohar. By the way, the Ramah on the spot says, no, we're not changing minhagim and psakim. But that's what the Beit Yosef says. And therefore, we should follow the Zohar. Then the Beit Yosef says, however, I have a way to fit the Zohar with the poskim. How? Say it so quietly that your own ears don't hear it. It's very quiet, yeah? You don't hear it yourself. Then maybe the Zohar agrees. Maybe that's not a real call. You're not hearing. So maybe the Zohar's okay with it. And the poskim are okay with it. I made a pshara. Shiduch. Hakol beseder. But what do I see from the Beit Yosef? Had he not been able to fit the Zohar with the poskim, who would he go with? The Zohar. He wouldn't have gone with the Zohar against the Gemara. We don't have any proof for that, and we have proof elsewhere or the opposite. But poskim versus Zohar. Why? Because his assumption is the poskim would never dare argue with the Zohar. Tefillin is similar. He quotes very interestingly that the minhag in Spain, Sfarad, was not to wear tefillin on Chol HaMoed. And he says he spoke to his uncle, Rabbi Yitzhak Karo. This is the Beit Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch speaking. He writes, I spoke to my uncle, Rabbi Yitzhak Karo, and he told me originally the minhag in Spain was to wear tefillin on Chol HaMoed. Why did they change? Because they found the Zohar. And the Zohar says, don't you dare wear tefillin on Chol HaMoed. You mavazeh et ha'mo'adot, chayav mitah, terrible things. And therefore they all stopped. Can you imagine the whole country of Chachamim, Tzadikim, Nevonim, everybody decided, Zohar, we're stopping. We didn't know this. Af pam lo yadanu, we're going to stop putting on our tefillin. So you see how much weight they gave the Zohar, as long as it's not against the Shas, they follow the Zohar, even against the minhag.
Why does Zohar have so much weight?
Why does the Zohar
And
have
yet
so
there's
much?
many, not the Prophet Sephardi as well, which they don't take the Zohar on board.
Who doesn't take Zohar on board? No.
And the Sephardi rabbis.
Where? Who?
Sephardi rabbis, they say not they don't believe in it, but they say we don't take from the Zohar.
Well, I've never heard anything.
It's
Of
Orthodox Sephardi rabbis. I don't mention names. Huh?
No, I've never heard anything of the sort. It's
No,
very-
the Shor, and he mentioned in the Shor, he said.
Because he's not. I know who you're talking about. He's not giving a historical context. It's not fair.
They said,
Every
he
Kehillah
quoted some
Sfaradi.
rabbis in Israel. He quoted some Sephardi rabbis in Israel. They said,
We need names.
He mentioned names.
Kapah, Tzahori. Who? No, we need names of the people who he mentioned. Shalush. I'll tell you historically quickly. Every single Sfaradi Kehillah that had an effect on the wider Sfaradi world. I don't know, you're going to find me some village that had some Chacham that no one has ever heard of. Doesn't hold so much weight. Yeah? Every Sfaradi, let's say, Turkey, Iraq, Haleb, Morocco, Spain, Portugal, everywhere took the Zohar on board to some degree. Now, to what degree was vikuchim? I can't say everybody accepted it to the same degree. Egypt, by the way, as well. I'll give you an example. There was in Khaleb, there was Hacham called the Bet Dino Shel Shlomo. Rabbi Shlomo, if I'm not mistaken, of Shlomo Laniado. And he wrote a harem on anyone who doesn't follow the Arizah. That's even after the Zohar. Anyone who doesn't follow the Arizah, asu cherem alav. Now that's extreme, right? So, and by the way, if you trace back the lineage of some of these rabbis that you might be referring to, one in particular, you go to his teacher, and his teacher, you go 6 or 7 generations up, Hacham Laniado is the teacher. His great-great-grandfather in Limud, in Talmud, made a harem on people who don't keep the Ari, and he's telling us that we shouldn't accept the Zohar. Unbelievable. Yeah, so it's also the idea, one idea being peddled around, is the Zohar never was a legislative work. It's not a halachic work. The Zohar says instructions, don't do this, do that. It's poetic. אני לא מבין את זה.
I think it was hidden for 1,000 years. Was that book hidden for 1,000 years?
Yeah. That's a different argument. Yes, but then again, there are books that we have.
It's not my
No,
question.
there are books that we have today that weren't around for hundreds of years. Tshuvot HaRambam, Tshuvot HaRif, and there were people, namely the Chazon Ish, Ashkenazim Davka, who weren't so happy with books that were away for hundreds of years to bring them to halacha. However, most poskim don't agree with that. Yeah, most poskim don't agree with that. But look, we have evidence now. Chacham Hillel helped us out. Chacham Yaakov Hillel has a sefer now where he shows evidence that the Geonim of Hye Gaon specifically had the Zohar. We have citations of Rav Hye Gaon in Hebrew. The Zohar is in Aramaic. Hebrew word for word from the Zohar, and he quotes Nusach Yerushalmi. That's what he quotes it. Yesh Nusach Yerushalmi. There's no such Talmud Yerushalmi. Lo hayah v'lo nivra. 3 or 4 times that he quotes a Nusach that is word for word in Aramaic in the Zohar. He quotes it in Hebrew, and he calls it Nusach Yerushalmi. And there's no Talmud Yerushalmi or any midrash that we have that is that. I could go through the tshuvot of Rav Hye Gaon. So we need someone to properly do the research and to dispel this notion that the Zohar was not around and the concepts of the Zohar were not around. A. And B, whether we take it l'alacha, that's a real, honest, legitimate discussion if we take on the Zohar l'alacha. The Sfaradim, as I showed you from the Bet Yosef, and from all Chachmei Sfarad, they stopped putting on tefillin based on the Zohar. So this would be a piece of evidence. You should be taking this as a piece of evidence that this man is wrong, right? Yeah.
It means the psakim fell out of use.
What?
It can't have been that widespread if the psakim fell out of use.
What do you mean?
I
Psakim
mean
fell
to
out?
say, if it was the case that in Yitzhak Karo's day, in Yitzhak Karo's day,
Yeah.
they discovered Zohar, that means that there was a huge gap from when the
There's
Zohar
no question that the Zohar became. There's no question about the fact that the book, as we know it, the Zohar, was not accessible to at least the overwhelming majority of Klal Yisrael for many, many years. Only until 600-700 years ago.
Even psakim that come out.
Not all. There are quite a few psakim, especially in the times of the Geonim and others, that are Brit Milah, etc. The things that the Geonim write that only make sense based on the Zohar. The fact that and again, I was specific to the concept of this. Right. Okay. I'm not saying no one ever. There's a new question as to whether the Zohar, you have to keep the Zohar, or only you have to keep it if there's a machloket poskim and the Zohar tilts the scales. That's a legitimate. Again, there's a legitimate questions, right? The Bet Yosef's opinion is, as long as it's not against the Shas, and at least it's discussing something that the Shas discusses. It's discussing Aliyah Torah, right? It's not telling you do fast for 500 days. I don't know if the Bet Yosef would expect every person to. The Zohar is not. No, why is the Talmud binding? Why? Why is the Talmud Bavli binding? Because Klal Yisrael will makabel it. The entire Klal Yisrael accepted it. That's why. Who says this? The Rambam, right? Accepting people as poskim, accepting things, give it halachic power to bind you. Of course, something in the Torah doesn't need you accepted it at Har Sinai. But divrei hachamim, to be a specific chacham, to be binding over you, is because you accepted it.
Right.
Okay. Now, yeah.
Wasn't there a concept, or is there a concept that one shouldn't learn Zohar as a sprinkling, if you like, that when you've studied Gemara to a level,
Yes, there is that concept. Absolutely. I did hear from someone that depends how you're learning it. If you're learning it in a deep or esoteric manner, then you're right. You should be a Talmid Chacham, and so you should be on some level. You should know Gemara to a degree. However, if you're learning it as a midrash, it's specifically a midrash that might be mehazek you, then you can. There are those who hold that you can. Okay, right. Let's not digress too much. So get back to this. So we have a Zohar that says that Minha Gdola is even lechatahila. Now we have, I'll coin the rule from Rabbi David ben Zimra, who was one of the biggest poskim in Mitzrayim, the Radbaz. He writes that whenever there's a mahloket poskim, HaZohar tachriya. If you have the Rif on one side, the Rambam on the other side, and the Zohar is on the Rif side, so the Zohar is machriya which posek you should follow. You hear his klal? And that's a very accepted klal between the poskim. It's a very accepted rule. So here, if we would apply that rule, we have the Rosh on one side, the Rambam on the other, even leave the Rif. Let's pretend we didn't have the tshuva of the Rif. The Zohar goes with the Rosh. So we'll go with the Rosh. You hear that? Now, if you apply that rule again, you have another reason to be lenient and say Minha Gedolah is fine. Okay. Now, does that rule trump the idea of the Shulchan Aruch? Following the Shulchan Aruch, I'll try and be quick now. Listen to this. There's a very interesting. There's someone called the Petah Hadvir, Reb Chaim Binyamin Pintromoli. Pintromoli from Turkey, from I believe Izmir, and he writes the following. He says that all the Sfaradim in Kriyat Shema Sha'al Hamita. What do we say? Yoshev Beseter Elyon. How does it end? Ki ata Adonai Mahsi. You don't carry on the pasuk. The pasuk finishes Elyon Samta Me'onecha. We stop in the middle of a pasuk. Why? Now, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch in the Beit Yosef, it sounds like you should continue. You should continue, maybe even the whole Mizmor. The Mizmor finishes off Orech Yamim Asbi'ehu Var'ehu Bishu'ati, much after that. He, however, quotes, some poskim say, specifically you should finish at Ki ata Adonai Mahsi, because then it's 60 words. From Yoshev Beseter Elyon until Ki ata Adonai Mahsi is 60 words, and the Ritba writes that you should specifically say 60 words because it says Hine mitato shel Shlomo shishim giborim saviv la. Each of these words are keneged those giborim, and they're saviv la mitah shelcha. So we have a machloket. Some are saying say the whole paragraph. Some are saying at least finish the pasuk, and others are saying no. Ki ata Adonai Mahsi. Finish off there because 60 words. Marana Shulchan Aruch sounds like you should finish off. You shouldn't finish at Ki ata Adonai Mahsi. You shouldn't stop there. Says the Petah Hadvir, however, it's a mahloket poskim, and the Arizal says you should finish at Ki ata Adonai Mahsi. So I will apply the Radbaz's rule. Now he extrapolates the rule, he extends it. The Radbaz was talking about the Zohar. He says Kabbalah. Okay, Kabbalah yachriya. Mahloket poskim, Kabbalah yachriya. Mahloket poskim, the Arizal is also Kabbalah. Kabbalah yachriya. You hear his application of that rule? Says the Petah Hadvir, therefore you should only say until Ki ata Adonai Mahsi, which is what we all do, and all of the Sidurim, Sfaradim, for 60 words, because the Ari is machriya between the poskim. You hear this? That means he's assuming that trumps the Shulchan Aruch, because he just told me that the Shulchan Aruch is on the side that you should finish the paragraph. So he assumes that the idea of the Kabbalah being machriya, tilting the scales, being the decisive factor between the poskim, is more, it takes precedent over the Kabbalah that we have to follow the Shulchan Aruch. We follow Shulchan Aruch. Yes, but if you have the Kabbalah on one side and it's siding with some poskim, so you have posek versus posek and the Kabbalah's on this side, that's machriya even against the Shulchan Aruch. Good raya? You agree to the proof I'm bringing? No? Lama lo? Why not? Tell me why not. Maybe I'm wrong.
Maran didn't see the Zohar.
First of all, it's very clear. Maran didn't. It is very clear. I'll give you an example. Mari Abu Hav writes, I heard in the name of the Zohar you should. I think I'm not sure what it's referring to. If I'm not mistaken, it's about. It's about praying very quietly. I might be wrong though. Yeah? And the Bet Yosef, and the Maria Abu says, don't rely on it because I didn't see it inside. And Bet Yosef says, I looked, I found. It doesn't sound like all of the Zohar was on their fingertips, and I don't know how accessible it was, and I don't know whether they had the whole thing, I don't know. But he almost always, when he quotes the Zohar, he writes, Umatzati. He doesn't normally write that about regular poskim. Okay, so can someone tell me why I'm wrong? I'm proving that the idea that Kabbalah should be machriya between the poskim trumps our acceptance of the Shulchan Aruch. From the Petah Hadvir, you could say other people argue with him. Petah Hadvir, posek chashuv, and at least according to him. So, okay. Now,
So Kabbalah should tilt the scale now.
Kabbalah should tilt the scale if there's a machloket poskim. I'm not going extreme like some people go. Maybe I should be, but I'm not quoting that. Some people say whatever the Arizal says has to fit with the Gemara, and then if we see it doesn't fit with the Gemara, we must have learned the Gemara wrong, and we go with Arizal. There are some people who say that, even if there's no poskim, even against all the poskim. Masha Ari Omer Zeh. I'm not even saying that. I'm being parva. Yeah.
I heard that supposed to do Mincha bit Shkia.
Yes, very good point. The Ari HaKadosh was makpid And that's already in the Gemara, in the Shas. That the best time to pray is close to Shkia. I said that earlier. But we have absolutely no proof that that's Lechat Achila and B'di'avad. Let's be clear. What Lechat Achila, very often people think is translated as optimal. That is a very inaccurate translation. Because that sounds like it's not a must. Optimal. It's good. It's ideal. It's the best. That's not Lechat Achila. Lechat Achila means if you come to a rabbi and you say, can I do that? The answer is no. So why do you call it Lechat Achila? Just say Asur. No. Because if you did it, he's not going to scream at you. If you did it, it works. That's Lechat Achila and B'di'avad. There's another concept called mitzvah min muvhar, chumrah, adif, whichever word you want to use, which is, if you ask the rabbi, what's the best time to pray? Netzah. Does anyone say you have to pray Netzah? Absolutely not. There's no chovah. Is it lechat achila to pray on Netzah? You could use the word lechat achila, but it's an improper way of using the word. It's not exact. It's not accurate. It's not the right way to speak that lechat achila you should pray netz. That's the wrong way to speak. Muvhar. Mitzvah min muvhar. And that's the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. On Netzah mitzvah min muvhar. So, the Ari HaKadosh used to pray close to the Shekiah, and he held that's the best time. That's not a contradiction to the Zohar, because I never said that the Zohar says the best time to pray is Minha Gedolah. I said it's absolutely fine. Meaning, even Lechat Achila, you can pray for Minha Gedolah. You want to know the best time? That's something else. It's mitzvah min muvhar, close to Shekiah. That's what the Ari held. By the way, the Ari also prayed Arvit. It sounds like before Tzet HaKochavim.
Yeah, straight
after Shkia. Even though the Ben Ish Chai doesn't quote that. Okay, so I want to summarize all the points, and I want to say what I think is halacha l'ma'aseh. I've presented a mahloket rishonim as to whether Mincha Gedolah is lechat achila or only b'di'avad. Okay? That's number one. Number two, the Shulchan Aruch is machmir and says Mincha Gedolah is only b'di'avad. And the assumption, the reason why he goes with that is because it's the Rambam, and he prefers to go with the Rambam over the Rosh. There's a tshuva of the Rif that says Mincha Gedolah is even lechat achila. That the Shulchan Aruch certainly did not see. And there is big room to suggest that had he seen that, he would have been chozer, because now you have two of his three amudei hahora'ah on one side, i.e. the Rif and the Rosh, saying Mincha Gedolah is even lechat achila. Furthermore, we have a Zohar that is almost explicit. I think it's mukhrah, it's definite, that the Zohar holds that from Mincha Gedolah is lechat achila. And therefore, based on other areas in the Sefer Bet Yosef, it would seem very likely that this would tilt the scales. He would side with the Zohar, as he does. You could make differences. You could say here, he can be machmir against the Zohar. In those cases, he would be fine. But we've got a Zohar. And that's another reason to say the Bet Yosef would have retracted his opinion. Furthermore, even if he wouldn't have retracted, maybe we should use the Zohar to be machriya between the poskim, even against the Shulchan Aruch, as I've shown you from the Petach HaDevir. I was also put one last point. As far as I know, the minhag is to be lenient. The minhag is not with the Shulchan Aruch. Do you know anybody who says, I don't pray Mincha Gedolah? This is b'di'avad. I only pray Mincha Ketana. Yeah? Maybe one or two. In London. Do you know anyone who does that? I don't know. I don't know anyone who does that. I would say, and the Shalmet Tzibur writes this. He writes as a question. He says, I see even Chachamim and great people, they all do Mincha Gedolah. I don't understand how they can do this against the Shulchan Aruch. I think we have a minhag not to be makpid, to pray Mincha Ketana, which does minhag, not like the Shulchan Aruch, have legitimacy? That's a mahloket poskim. Many poskim say, even if a minhag is against the Shulchan Aruch, minhag, if it has poskim on its side, it's got legitimacy.
Yeah, but Shulchan Aruch, he said, b'di'avad to pray Gedolah or?
B'di'avad Gedolah. So therefore, I think, bearing all that in mind, in my opinion, I know this might sound as like a chidush, and I haven't had this opinion until I relearned the sugya recently. I think even lechat achila, you can pray Mincha Gedolah. If you want to know the best time to pray, I wouldn't even say it's Mincha Ketana. The best time to pray is close to Dimdumei Hamma with the Shkia. Don't get too close to Shkia. I don't want to give an exact time because the poskim aren't exact. So it's within half an hour, within 20 minutes of Shkia to begin Amidah. Within 20 minutes of Shkia should be fine. But that's the best. That's a chumrah. It's not a chova lechat achila. Lechat achila, in my opinion, based on everything that I said, no problem, even for Sfaradim, to pray from Mincha Gedola. Ken nireh la'aniyut da'ati. I'm happy to be corrected if people have ra'ayot and proofs, especially bearing in mind the whole thing is a whole question of lechat achila. There's the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. People don't know this. He made Sfarim on halacha as well, not just ala Torah. He made a sefer called Rishon Etzion Chefetz Hashem. And he also made the most famous halachic sefer of his is Pri Toar on Yoreh De'ah. And he writes there, whenever you have something that b'di'avad works, and you've got a machloket, if lechat achila it's okay, go lenient. Very good svara. B'di'avad everyone agrees it's okay. So your machloket is lechat achila, you can be meken. So that's what we have here. B'di'avad, everybody agrees you're okay. We've got a safek if lechatchila it's okay. We're not sure. Let's say you're not sure if the Shulchan Aruch would have been choser. You're not sure if the Zohar should tilt the scales. You're not sure if I learned the Zohar right. Say it's a safek. Say it's a safek. Kol she b'di'avad mutar, sfeko mutar lechatchila. So I think that can also be used to strengthen our stance. But I think mincha gedola, even lechatchila, you can pray halacha u'lema'aseh.